Hey, everybody. How are you all? All right. Thursday. People standing. Come find seats. There's lots in front up here, and there's more in the back. Glad everybody's here. You're making good choices on a Thursday. How many of you are about to finish school for the year? Congrats to you. Good work. With excitement. We're really thrilled about this reading and excited to have a crowd here. This is a 4x4 MFA reading, so 4 readers from the University of Arizona MFA program who've graduated from that program, have gone on to do other things, all have new books. We'll hear more about all of that very, very soon. We're thrilled that this is happening and thrilled to welcome these writers back to the Poetry Center to do a reading tonight. My name is Tyler. I work here as the director at the Poetry Center. I'll just say a couple quick updates, and then we'll jump right into this reading and hear from these folks. There's one more reading in our list for the season, so it's been a beautiful spring season with a ton of really amazing readings. There's one more to come. That's on the 11th of May, so it's a Saturday. It happens at noon, and it's for the participants in our Classes and Workshops program. So people who have taken classes at the Poetry Center all have a chance to read, and that will happen here at the Poetry Center on the 11th at noon. You're welcome to come back to that. We'd love to see you. Sooner than that, on Saturday the 4th, as in 2 days away, at 9 o'clock, there is a docent-organized tour of the haikus that are posted in downtown Tucson. So you might know about this contest that the Downtown Tucson Partnership runs, where they ask for haiku on a particular theme related to the desert or to Tucson. And so there were 20 winners this year out of 2,000 haiku. They placed them all into planters in downtown Tucson throughout the spring season. So there'll be a walk, or if you like, a haiku hike, as they call it. Of those, it's about a mile. It should be really beautiful. 9 a.m. on Saturday, there's going to be that walk led by our docents. If you're interested in doing that, you can meet in the lobby of Hotel Congress at 9, and then they'll depart from there. So it should be a lot of fun, a chance to be in beautiful downtown before it gets too hot. Come join us for that. So that's the 4th. There's the reading on the 11th. Next up, and this is, I'm excited to tell you all about this. This is an event that's been added. It's our first summer social of the season. So on Wednesday, the 15th of May, we'll be moving to the Century Room at Hotel Congress, and there'll be a book launch for the writer Karen Brennan, who has a new book of stories coming out called Rabbit in the Moon, published by Schaffner Press, a publisher here in Tucson. That'll be at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th. And again, in the Century Room, it's a free reading. There'll be free snacks, which you can avail yourselves of. And then the bar will be doing what the bar does, if you're interested in those things as well. So those are all coming up. You can learn about all of those on the Poetry Center website, poetry.arizona.edu. There are some books for sale. So some of the books are for sale over here on my right. Some of them are for sale right here on my other right. And then around the corner outside, I also just want to mention there are some free books. So the books for sale are from the readers tonight. Please come and spend your money on those. They're all beautiful books. These are, I think, first books for each of the writers tonight, and we're really excited to support them. Let's buy them all up and send it home with empty boxes. The free books that are around the corner are gifts from the Lannan Foundation, which is an organization that supported literature for a long, long time. And they're winding down their work as a foundation. These are 2 chapbooks that they had many extras of, and so they sent some here to share with audiences in Tucson. One is a chapbook of the poet Mahmoud Darwish, and one is a chapbook of the poet Adrian Rich. And so those are right around the corner in the breezeway. We hope you'll take some of those home with you as well after you buy the other books that are here, in that order. And then the last thing I just want to say really quickly is that we'll shift to our summer hours here at the Poetry Center as the semester ends. So we'll be closed on Saturdays. We'll be open from Tuesday through Friday from 9 to 5. And that begins on the 11th. So the 11th is of May. It's the first day that we're closed. And we'll be closed on Saturdays throughout the summer until the end of August when the school year starts back up again. Hope you'll come visit us and enjoy the great air conditioning and the many, many poetry books as you're able. It's a great pleasure to welcome up a friend and a colleague who will do the introductions tonight for the readers, the Professor Andrew Monson. Please give him a warm welcome, and he's got a lot in store for us. There it is. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you to Tyler and Paula for all your work and for making this space available. And I'd like to thank also Bojan Lewis for his curation of the Distinguished Visitors Series, and to all of you for coming out. It's delightful to see you here. I'll warn you in advance, I might have gone a little hard with these introductions. So we'll just get to them here in a minute. But I think of all the readings I have the pleasure to introduce, this is my absolute favorite kind of reading. A reading in which we celebrate first books by 4 amazing writers who are also alums of the MFA program at U of A. I've had the pleasure of working with each of these students and have, after a great deal of observation, come to the following conclusions about their true natures. So I will be introducing our beautiful readers tonight by their Dungeons & Dragons classes, 5th edition specifically for the real ones out there, with a few liberties taken because screw it, because we all need companions for our adventures, and because these writers are badass. And I cannot imagine any companions better out there in the darkness than these 4, whom I also call friends. So we're going to start big tonight with Gabriel Dozal, a warlock, a wielder of magic derived from an extraplanar entity. In this case, the US-Mexico border, or Jeff Yank, curator and introducer of bad movies and Mondays at the Loft, or possibly the spirit of language itself. Through pacts made with these powerful beings, warlocks unlock magical effects, both subtle and spectacular, seen, for instance, in The Border Simulator, a first book that refuses the given modes of writing about the US-Mexico border, opting instead for straight-up weirdo bilingual riff-tastic magic. He's a bit of a trickster figure. A warlock like Dozal is typically a bit shady, so you keep your eye on your wineskin and your NBA TV password and your Yngwie Malmsteen vinyl, and don't tell him on broken down sad-ass Twitter he's not allowed to repurpose language with AI or any other tool in the spellbook. Dozal uses all tools, even the forbidden ones, which are the best kind. His spells involve mashups, cut-ups, massive riffing, the shape-shifting power of technology, and the even greater power of language to summon and command all these things. The only question one might ask is, to what end, Dozal? Do you serve evil or do you serve good? To what end beyond sheer delight, beyond simulated thrills, asking questions impossible enough to attack in any other way? To what end beyond being dazzling and being sad and being smart and being funny? To what other masters do we even want our poems to serve? His primary ability is charisma. His alignment is unclear, but it probably doesn't matter. Can anything or anyone stop Gabriel Dozal?
Thanks, Andrew. That was perfect. I wouldn't want my intro any other way. Thank you all for being here. This means a lot to me. I've thought too much about the poems I'm going to be reading tonight ever since I got the email. So thank you to Kate Bernheimer and Bojan Lewis for kind of organizing this. Thank you, of course, to Tyler, Sarah, Paola, Julie, everyone who works at the Poetry Center for just being amazing people. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Okay. So the poems are behind me as well, so you get like a visual element. This poem is dedicated to the creative writing class at York University in York, Nebraska. And there's actually 4 authors. It's myself, James Butler Gruitt, who is also a graduate of the MFA program in fiction here, and then his 2 creative writing students. There's only 2 people in this creative writing class, Eliza Rhoda and Jenna Smith, but we all kind of collaborated and wrote this poem together. And the title is, What's Happening in the Arby's Managers Group Chat in York, Nebraska? The cheese machine is broken. Lisa keeps texting cowboy emojis. Our location is wrapped from 9 to 3. My backline can be finished by close with just the slicer left. And if you wanted food, you could get food. Sometimes food was food. You waited a long time and got mad, but the sauce of Arby's is decent food. Jeremy hasn't learned how to work the register yet, but he loves mopping. My Arby's smells like a kitchen full of waffles. I start off by checking time punches, then start on turnovers and bacon. Arby's is like one of those nieces that gives you a shy fist bump. This Arby's is trying to reuse coupons that expired 40 years ago. The morning shift at Arby's is like 2 mirrors spinning down a drain. Stay in the top 3 out of all of our stores through peak times. Peak. And in between peak times, enter invoices, look at pictures of my niece from her Peppa Pig birthday party last weekend, check emails from corporate, and get my store ready for success. Arby's is only here for the scholarship money. Arby's gives my ex back his hoodie. Is this the Mexican market with the good, spicy mango candy? No, sir. This is an Arby's. And later, at the good Mexican market with the spicy mango, this Arby's wants to practice her Spanish. This Arby's took 2 semesters of non-native Spanish, but she's afraid of coming off as a try-hard Arby's. Well, thanks. So I'm going to read some poems from The Border Simulator. The Border Simulator, the book is a collection of voices. I think that's like the key to kind of unlocking them. They're all in kind of like a dramatic monologue of the voices of the characters Primitivo and Primitiva, who are sisters trying to cross the border. There's also kind of like a chorus of customs. They're kind of like this dark, patronizing voice over the proceedings. And then we're going to come across some new Border Simulator poems where there's a new kind of voice called undead customs. So they're customs, but they're undead. Okay, so this poem actually, this poem actually missed the cut for the Border Simulator. It should have been in the book, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I thought it'd be cool to share like a B-side with you all. Heaven is another seam come true in the bedazzled jean factory. And once the seams are true, then the jeans are made and ready to be worn by someone with more upward mobility. Mobility offered to them by the seam that you stitched, Primitiva. That made the jeans loose in the hips, a seam of which they are unaware of until they look in the mirror and see the crosser's pantheon of seams. Ed Hardy, the god of jeans. But look at these jeans. They are badly seamed. Even the best seam has an expiration date. Anytime you rip a seam on a pair of jeans, say, "Thank you, crosser, for giving my jeans what I can no longer attain, an end to the fitting." Thank you. This is there's like little notes above the poem. That's not the title, that's just like notes, which I thought I would stick in there. This is a tiny poem that riffs off of a Lil Wayne lyric that is riffing off of a George Strait lyric. You love emblems and flags, don't you, Primitiva? The flag of the border is its fence. It's the longest flag you've ever seen, rippling across the border. Where do all your fences live? All my fences live in Texas. Another note here. There's a line in this poem, and it's the title poem of the book, The Border Simulator, where I'm responding to a line from a poem by William Carlos Williams, the very last stanza, and it's up there. It says, "No one to witness and adjust, no one to drive the car." And there's like a response to that in this poem. The Border Simulator. The only thing sure in this world is death and Texas. The word crosser turtles in the throat of customs while a worker steers other workers. She's someone to drive the car and sigh a coworker's name, Primitivo. Customs is deeply invested in watching Primitivo cross the border once a night, always a night, some closed eye visual. The Border Simulator, more like Border See You Later. Were you pure of heart when you wrote this thing, or what? Okay, this next poem, the very first part of this poem, is ripped directly from a Facebook group called Reporte de Puentes. And on Reporte de Puentes, it's a Facebook group that lets people who are traveling from Juarez to El Paso know how long the lines are at the port of entry at the different bridges. I translated it into English, but yeah, this first one is just like a comment that's ripped from this Facebook page. There's a couple, this is definitely a new one. This is not really in the Border Simulator. There's a character, Nefta, his sister Semeli, and then there's a coyote named Eddie. Yeah, they're kind of characters in this world that are trying. This is very, very new. Nefta's interview answer 2. I'm on foot crossing the Santa Fe Bridge, and the mile to get in is a long line. Hey, I'm going to go door to door selling remodeling services, and that way I'll get my big commission, get money emoji. I came here for work, carnal. Or you can say, I also seek carnal work. Work that wakes up the flesh, gets the blood trading. I traded my life and my life savings to Eddie, the coyote of my dreams. He was the coyote of my waking life too. But somewhere along the path, Eddie learned how to receive Venmo in my dreams. And in my dreams, I'm the original dreamer. I'm at White Sands chasing seme down a dune. I'm careening down while indistinguishable bone fragments surge from the ground. And the bones are at times made into wind chimes by undead customs. Endless bones of crossers humming and clanging in the desert over which undead customs and their horses tour the gullies. The rhythmic, musical horses. You hear customs chase down crossers and lassoed them. But as we rewound this video, we saw crossers had not been lassoed. They had instead been turned into lassos, rope. And there's piles of these rope crossers dotting the border like rattlesnakes sleeping. It reminds me of a time where once I was raptured by my ID. Yes, my ID took me to heaven, and only my earthly possessions lay in my wake, which is funny because I was asleep, and I hear that's the best way to be raptured. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 more poems. And this one is also not a border simulator poem, and it's a send up to my cousin Parker, who he moved to Midland, Odessa to go work in the oil fields there. And he was working midnight shifts. He fell asleep at the wheel and he passed away in a car accident. But yeah, I love my cousin Parker. He was called Parker because when he was 3 years old, he couldn't say his name or his dad's name, which was Oscar. So he said Parker, so then that just stuck with him for the rest of his life, and his name was Parker. So here we go. At my cousin Parker's funeral, his other family was asked to stand up. His gang, Los Archis, signed respect to the past cousin. The gang took Parker's certificate of debt and wrote across it, paid in full. Parker spent his life introducing himself over and over. The Archis are pouring out in the corner of the funeral home's parking lot. When he was alive, the wages Parker earned were slipped into like a slip-and-slide. He laid himself out at night. Instead of water, there were dollar signs that crews controlled his way to the oil fields of Odessa. Oh, thanks. Okay, and this is the last poem I'll read, and it's in the Border Simulator. I guess I should say also, if you don't know, the Border Simulator, it's a bilingual book, so it has the English on the left side and the Spanish facing, so you can kind of like play around and jump around to both English and Spanish. I worked with an amazing translator, Natasha Tiniacos, a Venezuelan translator, and her poems in Spanish, I mean, my poems in Spanish that she translated and wrote are amazing and fantastic. So please check those out. Okay, this is called You Look at Crossers, You Look Just Like Them. Oh yeah, and I guess I coined a word called Rossing or Rossers, and these are people who cross the border to shop at Ross. Dress for less, yes. You look at crossers, you look just like them. The Border Simulator is constant practice at Rossing, shopping at Ross. What to say when crossing, am I right? And Ross, loss prevention, is always side-eyeing you, the merchandise. You might steal a badly seamed pair of bedazzled jeans, but Ross, loss prevention, cares more about you, stealing yourself. Borders accept crossers as payment now. The cryptocurrency of the border is the crosser, and they are encrypted like boxes as they cross, and soon they are released back from the crypt. If customs knows the crosser, they can't check their papers. But it's hard not to know everyone in this narrow corridor where corridos tuba from every car. It's so loud that it's quiet. You also don't get old. You just give up on the bridge, waiting next to the same daewoo for hours, and you roll down your window and start swapping stories about other wait times. On the Mexican side, customs had enough of the line and shouted to all the cars waiting, "Bocina, Si no existes, honk if you don't exist. And all the cars honked. You couldn't even hear your passenger. Thank you.
See what I mean? Warlock. So let us welcome back to Tucson, Maddie Norris. And this one took me a little while. A sorcerer, a nonfiction caster who draws on inherent magic from a gift or bloodline. Sorcerers carry a magical birthright conferred upon them by bloodline, otherworldly influence, or exposure to unknown forces. I'm sorry if I'm telling you stuff you already know. And in the case of Maddie Norris, possibly all three. Hurt into literature, sorcery, maybe by the death of her father, or maybe by the great beauty and strangeness of the medical illustrations in the books she spent time with after his death. She wields an otherworldly power honed by exquisite sentence training and long running in and well beyond the wilds of Tucson. Her primary ability is wisdom. There is much to be said and to be had about grief and loss, and how to be and to stay open to feeling, how not to be simply afraid of pain, but to fear it and to embrace it anyway. In her book, The Wet Wound, an elegy in essays, a deeply ensorceling text that is not for novices to pain. But if you're here, you're probably not. As a visiting assistant professor at Davidson College in the fall, she may or may not tell you that one can't study sorcery as one learns a language, any more than one can learn to live a legendary life. No one chooses the power of literary sorcery, Maddie Norris writes. The power chooses the sorcerer, and the power has chosen thee, Maddie Norris.
Thank you for that introduction. I hope I live up to it. And thank you all for being here. And thank you to the Poetry Center, to Tyler, to Paula. Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm going to be reading from my book, The Wet Wound, which is about the grief I experienced after the death of my father. So I want to say, please take care of yourself. So if you need to cry. I'm pretty jet lagged, so it might happen. If you need to laugh. If you need to leave, you'll be welcomed back if you choose to return. But before I start, I have a favor to ask. And I would like you to think of someone that you have lost that you would like to bring to this reading. So I want you to think of that person, and I'd like you to just tell the person beside you their name and briefly who they were to you. So think of someone that you have lost that you'd like to bring to this reading, and just tell the person beside you their name and briefly who they were to you. Okay. So, thank you for that. And yeah, I would love to hear about who you brought after the reading. Obviously, I'm bringing my dad, and I also want to bring one of the sharpest writers that I have ever met, Lucy Kirkman, who would give me feedback in that room right there. And she helped make this book what it is. So I'm going to be reading an essay called Childhood Eulogy, and it's a second-person essay, so I'm addressing my childhood. I think that's all you need to know. You were a boxy car, and Dad, what does this lever do? I was young, not even in grade school. My legs so short, my feet couldn't touch the mat. They just swung above it. You were the small hitch beneath the window, pulled before an answer. You were the open car door, air rushing in, because I needed to know how everything worked, because I needed to know what I could control and what I couldn't. You were Dad pulling over, shutting the door, and asking me to trust him. I trusted him. You were the Ramones CD playing on the living room stereo, a rough voice and simple chords. You were not necessarily the lyrics, but their cadence, the way you begged for people to hop around in socks on wooden floors, the joy and ridiculous movement of dance, the jumps of nothing to do, nowhere to go. Oh, the way Dad and I sang with breathy British accents. I want to be sedated. You were two pigtails and sometimes a French braid. Mostly you were a ponytail, because it was easiest to run around with hair out of the way. This was important, the freedom of the body. So of course, you were not bows. The dogwood trees blooming, neighbors waving from their porches, the sun gone, but the air still warm. You were walks around the neighborhood in the early evening with Dad. You were the ice cream at the end of the walk. I always thought of this as a secret, as a time just for Dad and me, safe from the rest of the world. And for a while, it was. You were the sprinkler I ran through at the same time as another girl, water like opaque glass, the warmth, the wetness, the sidewalk and the hidden sky and the bathing suit I wore. You weren't goggles because I didn't know I needed them, but you were the scrape I got when the other girl fell on top of me. She'd run at the same time as me, entered from the other side of the sprinkler, but I never saw her coming. You were my scar, the way Dad tended the wound, constant with care. You were never ear infections, and often you were perfect attendance. This was more luck than anything else. You were a lot of math games and worksheets. You were 2 + 1 = blank, and if I have 3 oranges and give 2 away, how many do I have? What am I left with? I mean, you were tonsils and adenoids, meaning you were too big to swallow. You were suffocating. At night, when I rasped, startling myself awake with a lack of oxygen, Dad heard me, and he knew how to help. He flashed a flashlight down my throat and saw you glisten. You were the hospital, the needle, the numbing cream, the screaming. You were high-pitched and sharp, a knife splitting almonds. You were popsicles and pudding. You were reruns of Matlock. You were vanilla yogurt, the kind I ate for breakfast. Eventually, you were just a story to tell friends. You were the protective goggles my brother and I wore when we chiseled away at fake fossils on the kitchen counter. 2 siblings eager to find bone, dust coating the formica like dried sweat on skin. You were the protective goggles Dad insisted I wear, even though they were a little too big. Better safe than sorry, he said. You were the chicken pox I gave a family friend at our chicken pox party. The ones that sent him to the hospital but just made me itch. We ran around in the yard playing tag and letting the grass squish beneath our bare feet. That virus still swims in my body, sure, but it hasn't bitten my skin since. I sometimes wonder, why was I lucky? Back then, when red dots pockmarked my body, you were just a lot of hydrocortisone cream. You were my bike in the Richland Fashion Mall parking lot, the floor still dark despite the overhead fluorescence, streamers rustling in the breeze. Dad pushed me, one hand on the handlebars and one on the seat, steadying me. He ran beside me and then let go. A classic movie scene, almost too cliched to be true. Then it was just you and me. No one to save us. You were gravity winning, and then you weren't. You were the brakes I still needed to learn how to use. You were badges of honor, scraped elbows. You were pain overcome. You were sips from Dad's Diet Coke, sweet aspartame that made me hunger for more. Did you know what was coming? Did you know that soon the pain would never go away? I want to slow down. Let me have this happiness for just a little while longer, please. Let me stay here, please. Once, you were Dad's car in my high school parking lot, me behind the wheel. Old Green Day turned low on the radio, then clicked off for concentration. You were the pollen lines curved by rain. You were the pine needles I eased over and the smell of evergreens in the air. You were the brakes jolting, my hands sweaty. You were the curbs I hit and then didn't. The white lines I parked over and on and in between. Dad was patient with me. He let me take all the time I needed, meeting out minutes like the ticker tape would never end. You were the conjugation of etra and photosynthesis and derivatives. You were good grades. A small bus on the way to math competition. You were numbers. A ribboned medal emblazoned with a calculator and division symbol. You were that boy's broken femur, the one he cracked in half during a game of pickup soccer. We drove him to the hospital in Dad's car, Dad in the driver's seat, me in the passenger, and him laid out across the back. You were his low, constant moans. The speed bumps we drove over slow, the railroad tracks we couldn't avoid. We could only listen as he cried over his broken body. You were the car. First a silver Volvo, then a silver Mazda. The calculated gas mileage at the gas station, the equations Dad made me run through, the numbers that told us how far we could go with what we had. You were a growth in Dad's pancreas, a tumor. Mom did not call you cancer, but that's what you were. You were Sufjan Stevens' Impossible Soul, the longest track on the album over and over and over again, alone on the drive to school. If I got to the parking lot early enough, before too many other people were milling about, I would sink down in my seat and listen as I watched the sky. The pulp of my body scraped out. You were Diet Lemonade because what if the Diet Coke had caused the cancer? You were big armchairs beside IV drips. Room temperature yellow Gatorade because the cold interfered with the medicine. You were canceled runs, swollen ankles. You were one thing and then, all at once, another. Dying. You were dying. I can say that now that you've been gone for the better part of a decade. At the time, though, I couldn't even think it. Some things were beyond imagination. I thought I would see the end for what it was. I thought I would know, that it wouldn't come until I was ready. Sometimes hope looks like foolishness. You were WebMD at night. I huddled under a thin sheet in bed with my phone, cocooning myself. You were a 7% 5-year survival rate, but I didn't tell anyone this because I couldn't say the words. I couldn't speak those numbers, make them real in my mouth. You were thick envelopes in the mail from my brother, the ones he opened at the dining room table with the whole family huddled around, like we were hungry for a feast. You were his fingers, greedy for the insides, an imagined future. You were expensive college tuitions. You were painkillers and the CD Dad handed me, the pen he tried to write on it with. What CD were you? I can't remember now. Does it matter? You were his slurred words, more slurred than any drunk speech I've ever heard, an electric guitar slide I couldn't track. Yes, we can sell that, Mom said, as she took the disc and told me to go to my room. She knew not to puncture the world he lived in, to let him think that everything would be okay, to let me think the same. And really, she thought it too. We thought you would be okay. You were the yogurt Dad covered himself in, the yogurt he thought was hydrocortisone cream, the invisible bites he thought he had, the pain pills, the pain. You were the wet paper towel Mom cleaned the couch with, the couch. You were vanilla yogurt, the kind I ate for breakfast. I remember, you were the blueberry muffins we made while the miracle drug dripped into Dad's IV. You were the blueberries, so ripe, almost purple, a deep bruise. You were the red mixing bowl and the spatula I used to stir the batter. Dad usually stirred, but with his backpack filled with the miracle drug slung over his shoulder, his tubes got in the way. You were the tubes, but you weren't the miracle drug. Nothing was the miracle drug. You were lime green bracelets that said, it's not about the numbers, except it was about the numbers. Cancer growing, white blood cells depleting. You were the numbers. You were ice chips slipping down the throat, coughing. You were the corner hospital room, the one we moved to after the first one got too crowded. You were Dad's car on the drive home that night, the night they told us he would make it through. Mom in the driver's seat, me in the passenger, my throw-up smeared across the silver door. The slim birch tree I held when Mom pulled over to let me empty the nothingness inside me. You were time slowed down, molasses, a minute stretched like taffy. You were prayers even though I wasn't sure it would do anything. You were his breath, the effort it took to breathe, the air scratching at his esophagus. You were that rasp, the sound that won't leave me. You were Dad's hand, cold and heavy, the last piece of him I touched. You weren't my 18th birthday or my 20th or my 21st. What did numbers matter after? You weren't half a can of Bud Light on prom night. You weren't a bottle of gin in a dorm room. The way it felt cold, then warm, and then nothing felt like anything at all. You weren't a mysterious illness, one that left me tired, pulled vials of blood from my good veins, and gave me nothing in return. You weren't my car, the silver car, Dad's old car, ramming into brick walls, denting the front and back bumper. You weren't the tires swerving, smashing into a raised curb, the way a hole shredded open on impact. At the shop, the mechanic looked at the old tire stored in my trunk. Man, he said, that's really gone. You weren't majors and minors picking out colleges. You weren't waist-deep snow, the chill that made my cheeks ache. I couldn't stop smiling. The covered lawn, the library, the clock. You weren't the kitchen counter, the letter, the way Mom and I sobbed. It was Dad's alma mater, but I turned it down. It was too expensive. You weren't the ache that never left. My life cleaved between what is and what could have been. Years after you were gone, I read Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. It is easy to see the beginnings of things and harder to see the ends, but I know exactly when you ended. You couldn't exist without Dad. Maybe what Didion means is that it's harder to look at the ends of things. Almost 10 years later, and I still crinkle when I hear the Ramones. You weren't dance floor makeouts, arms trailing bodies, waist, thighs, chests, lips. You weren't misplaced hunger. I ate anything I could. I tried desperately not to collapse. You weren't Frankenstein or the epistolary mode. You weren't heavy textbooks that curved my spine, my statistics class, or the years or days. You weren't numbers I could manipulate. You weren't a crowded music festival with songs that vibrated my bones. All those bodies, sweating, swaying. You weren't Anderson .Paak or Muna or Sylvan Esso. You weren't the Jack and Coke I drank outdoors waiting for the next act. The way the liquid slid down my throat, cool and traceable until it dispersed, until it disappeared. You weren't Diet Coke. Why weren't you a different DNA sequence? Why weren't you higher blood cell counts or shrinking tumor? Why were you take and not give? You were so many things, so why weren't you a miracle? Thank you.
Damn, okay. You're gonna take a moment to reset. Wisdom, sorcerer. Yet, Gabriel Palacios, clearly a wizard. No question. That's just it, bro. Don't at me. Palacios is a magic user capable of manipulating the structures of reality, drawing in the subtle weave of language that permeates the cosmos. Wizards cast poems of explosive fire, arcing lightning, and especially in Palacios' case, subtle shades of deception. Their mightiest spells change one substance into another, call meteors down from the sky, or open portals to forgotten worlds, like Tucson's own Spanish Trail Motel, perhaps. Wizards live and die by their poems. Everything else is secondary. And Palacios' poems are a special kind of magic, weaving shadow into shadow, summoning old songs playing in abandoned malls, or half-remembered, post-colonial, but not too boring about it, ghosts who live in the static after the song has faded. His primary ability is intelligence, with a lingering sense of sadness. Mysterious, layered, laconic, his spellbook, a 10-peso burial for which truth I sign, feels to me like a secret that could unlock the path to a power greater than any magic available in the present age, which is why you should buy it and listen to him now, Gabriel Palacios.
Should have planned this entrance a little better, but maybe this is what was meant to be. Thank you, Ander. Is it possible to project the orange book cover? Well, okay. It was plain at the beginning. We might see it again. I went over my whole entire life, my childhood. I busted out of jail through the hymn you dragged yourself across, stop motion like is gathering the keychains and prescriptions of your purse from the movie theater rug at the ocean floor. Same despondent pattern on the t-shirt that gets tossed from the wagon that heads up your parade. I want to touch the oldest silver in your grandma's house. Hear the version you know best. Thank you. And it's really nice to be invited and remembered and to be here sharing this moment. So thanks, MFA program. Thank you, Poetry Center. I truly don't take it for granted. Do you know what a Fiji mermaid is? Do your Googles work on your phone? It's F-I-J-I, mermaid. Or you can look up F-E-E-J-E-E, mermaid. And this is how we read poems together in 2024. You gotta meet me halfway with these ones. But this poem that appears in the book has a Fiji mermaid in it. And if you're looking at it now, it's like this patchwork stitched together beast, this horrible turducken-like thing. And it's also like a hoax. It's a fake. It's a sideshow thing, which seems right. And there's one of those in this poem. And there's also an epigraph that's kind of long, so I'll just kind of describe what it does. But there's a book called Spanish Colonial Tucson, A Demographic History, that names an ancestor of mine pretty uncharitably. And I love it because there's a complaint from a Spanish priest that my ancestor was kind of inept. And what really makes me, what I get a kick out of is that even in the late 18th century, there's this sentiment that we're just tired of Nepo babies and their ineptitude. And I think the quote from it was that this guy does nothing but dance, gamble, and sport fancy clothes. So this is called In the Style of Early Television Makeup. To what extent is one ancestor you, ebb exposed in uniformless skull who evidently once sat for a portrait on a donkey painted wraith-like in the style of early television makeup, on the very crushed water bottle island vortices you trawl tonight. Hat with the extravagant galloon, blood-black Sea of Cortez, All souls, didn't mother comb for bone slivers with your toothbrush, splice wreckage, uncorrupted digit, true cross, the figurehead doll's hard, recurring white syphilitic eye, hoist that Fiji mermaid in your church clothes? Thank you. Some of the threads in this book are inheritance and fakery and self-implication. Like, are we who we are purported to be, or are we faking it? And I feel like I'm faking it all the time. When I was really young, I took part in this Andean folk music group. I was kind of roped into this thing where they had a revolving membership. And so sometimes some of the people couldn't come up from Obregon. And this is Andean folk music, so there's panpipes, and the charango is made out of armadillo hide. And I would come up and fill in and do my best, and we would play all of the disgusting golf resorts across the parched state. And there would be some folks. There was one gentleman, older gentleman, who was convinced that I was the same person who we'd seen last time and really taken a liking to. And I'm sure I didn't correct him. And I think that if he didn't like pet me on the head, he would have. And so I feel, I'm thinking about how people fake it. And I think that, one of the fun things to think about for me is like race fakery. Whether it's, how the Selena t-shirt we wear, or the mustache we have, and the way that we perform these things. And this book is a lot about just asking what true identity is, because it's just like a mirror image of racial purity, probably, right? And so 23andMe is the most American thing you can think of, because maybe you're 3 or 4% special and not what people thought you were, or maybe the other American thing about it is that it's really a cop tool, right? I think that's what it has to be. So the fake and the uncanny is something I can spend a lot of time thinking about. This is called The Friar's Daughter's Mother. Murió en el río de parto indígena, event of no agreed upon name, child born bears friar's child, a spade clangs dirt. We transmit via kitchen voice of ants. The father, Alessandro Branchi, OFM, gives the infant child, Carolina, name, softening a torch, trust over how I know him. My child's eyeball strobic in the wide-brimmed hatted death's head given placard. In museums, I am tampered with a little by a galleon's crude figurehead, by who was in her maker's mind. I know the wooden woman's petty listicle of doomsday fears. The timeline to the left of my etch is an approaching fire. In exterminating thinking, I feel eyeless towards the truth I trust computer ghosts to translate. A stratagem for getting it together to buy groceries, as buying is its own sorcery against the deafening radioactivity of no stars. Ancestors, we treat them bad. I'd put the cable in their surnames if I could. I bark at my own children like the friars on these documents of death by childbirth. I pace a spinning infomercial kitchen, mic'd in blackness before them. These dead, my young, saying what you say, when stripped at customs of whatever honorifics to your heirloom epaulettes. Thank you. The Apollo astronauts, from what I understand, were country music lovers. These were guys from Texas. And they would bring records like Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys on board, like the Apollo 12 spacecraft. And there's this really interesting, fascinating tension and incongruity to that that I love. And this is a poem called The Country Music Lovers of the Spaceship that kind of celebrates the incongruities and tension of being a person in a world of other people. The country music lovers of the spaceship. Your employment is terminated as of today, as is your medical insurance. You have the option of continuing your coverage under the COBRA Act. I could hear myself recite. He signed and peeled out of our office park, colliding moments later half a mile down the road, full speed into a median, then another car. I could hear it. Then he was on life support, and then they took him off of it. I would recognize that slurred cumbia bass line drinking liquor in the post office parking lot on Christmas Eve at closing. I would recognize it underwater. I don't understand a word. The country music lovers of the spaceship mowed down revelers jammed up on the crosswalks. And the perseverance of their weekend news is my faith. Any showered Bible college smile might trepan our siloed and deadbolted down little scenarios. Their cloud drift maps screens dreamful two-step undoes thunderbird-like claw grips on myself. In one such sigh, I thought I'd make it seem I get a kick at living next to you is all it ever was. This is a newer one. A lot of these poems are from the book, A 10-Peso Burial for Which Truth I Sign. This is something a little newer. It's called Ancient Nuclear Events. Wind tricks waves on flooded potholes toward nowhere. Loads of things to want to do, no downtime in the work of slumping forward on the rug, weeping drunk, in the foster family of a long-skirted religious woman's trailer as pupils throb at fireworks on TV and the mouths of this manor gape in unison. And I can only recognize this shred of the tongue of their prayer now as I've prayed it all my life. It comes from the thing Foucault joked about, bodies and pleasures. Language deemed destroyed. I can't tell if you're changing or if I have. On the Indian subcontinent, the Mahabharata names an unlikely. She is minus one button eye and more precious for it. Messenger of death that rocked the continent. What allures you in the prehistoric village dances, ball games, avenues beyond even the airports to be surveilled fading down if none of it explains you? Look into your mom. Is she a gangster? Overheard music in malls was something Andrew mentioned that I liked a lot, that I like a lot. This is called It's Funny. Sometimes I can forget I'm even in a cult, raised in the train station mall by the people contracted to clean. I use the restroom at the t-ball field. A party forms to peek into the vent. It's funny. I'm 80% vacant. Escalator static, potted tree, half dust. Today I'll waste my shot on an artery or get my license back. The county courthouse fountain reconstitutes the misadventured dove. Thank you. This poem is called Life Like Coyote. I bit into that gale of steam, that clipboard name for having fear of us to lose. What's canon is your rust copper fluff on the breakdown lane, just sleep paralysis to soften us, cooked together, tickled by some pervert child-rearing book. Rinse me off the black market bus stop, horse track, dog track, State Route 86, none of it long for the backflow in which you churn. I'm just going to do a couple more. Thank you. It was important in this book that if I was going to get down some story about the land and where I come from, that I was attentive to the entire system of it rather than just the postcard iconography of it. And my middle school was a treacherous place, and I'm sure it still is. But in this poem, I smuggled this infamous graffito from those hallways. And it's a poem better than anything I could write. So I'll try to like pronounce it and make it come out. This is called Night Camouflage. I look like what I am, storefront rememberer. A mildewed stack of dead arcana with no currency to lie and claim you read. The station every aged-out abductee claims to have risen to, then cut and run from. Feeling for old drums of future war in structures powerless, riddled by the Zippo-lighted scrawls. Hit a crip in the lip, what drip? What crawls? Throw towels on it, skewer it with push knives, while Edith Street sleeps mix concrete, adrenalized by the sheer sustained torment of your cleaved-off, undeveloped twins, unsmotherable, dust pneumonia wincing. Lock your door, list your house. I'm just putting shit at this point in the calendar. The city gazes back now. Thanks. I have one more. This is also from the book, and it's called Desire. Late, when I can't sleep, I desire to give you these compliments. My eyes come morning won't pass Face ID's inspection, but they'll still be humans' eyes, await in the dressed body of an animal. A subscription to these humans' eyes await in the dressed bodies of meat animals that you can't even keep up with. Why, you ask me as you ask yourself, what cartel execution news ad did you click? If you'd been childless, no trace on any cyborg shrieking down the Martian tarmac of us. If I could choose a second stint, but more abandoned to you. Thank you.
Epic. One of the things that I really love, is feedback. One of the things I really love, well, maybe a little more. One of the things I love about teaching at this MFA program is it doesn't really have an aesthetic. You can see such a range of voices and like ideas about essays and poetry and being a writer that I just like, it blows me away to hear you all tonight. Fantastic. And I know you're all wondering, what class our last adventure of the night, Margo Steines is. A barbarian. A fierce warrior who can enter a battle rage, unbridled, unquenchable, the unrelenting assault of a storm, the churning turmoil of the sea, like brutalities. Her first, surprisingly unbarbaric book. Well, mostly unbarbaric, I mean it's kind of mostly restrained and able to look itself even if it hurts, but you can see that other something, a power simmering way down there below the finely crafted sentences. And full disclosure, some people are absolutely, definitely getting punched in the face. So this is not a book for the weak. Barbarians like Margo draw from a well of primal physicality, have uncanny reflexes and an eye for the deeply weird territories of the human body and the even less noble realms of the mind. Barbarians are known for their power, their endurance, and their artful interiority, and are known to perform great feats of essaying, strength, and human caring. They thrive in the wilds of their homelands, Hawaii, New York, Tucson, the human body, the human family, the steely, elegant, ferocious sentence. Inside every settled self of a barbarian, however, there is a storm. Her primary ability is strength, but also wisdom. I would suggest you do not piss her off. Please welcome Margo Steines.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely worth the stage fright just to receive that. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. I graduated the MFA in the quarantine with a new baby, and I did my graduation reading from like our little nursery on Zoom. So it feels very special to be here in the space with the people. So thank you to everyone who makes that possible. So this is my book. I'm gonna read to you from my book. The essays are too long to keep you here listening to, so I'm gonna read you part of one, and then for $17.95, you can find out what happens afterwards. I'm gonna read from an essay that is about, the whole book is about my body, other bodies, bad things we do to bodies. I'm gonna read from an essay that is about my body and the gym and a time when I tried too hard to be strong. The essay is called Sick Gains. In 2016, I was living in Honolulu, and I ran so many miles that my heel bone cracked. I had just started to run when I felt it, a loud, hot twinge in my right foot, as if a piece of cherry red steel was slicing through me from ankle to sole. When I was honest with myself, and it took several days before I was able to be so, I admitted that I had felt this pain for weeks, perhaps months, just quieter, soft enough to ignore. The mornings always smelled like plumeria and sweet rolls in Pololo, the valley where I like to run. On the particular morning when I finally cracked my heel, I'd had a perfect amount of coffee and had gotten enough sleep to power me through the 10 miles on my running docket. First, to the back of the valley behind the Zen Center. Back in the lush crevice between the ridges of the Ko'olau mountain range, crispy mountain apples, like sweet cucumbers that leave your mouth feeling wet and dry at the same time. They grow by the side of the road, and there's a small store where you can get sodas and poke bowls. When the pain announced itself, I immediately turned up the music in my headphones and took a series of deep breaths, trying to send the sensation somewhere else. This is the thing I know how to do, depart my body, be elsewhere. It almost always works. I can slide a needle into my flesh without flinching. I can look you in the eye while you punch me in the face. And yet, on this particular day, in the hot, sweet, wet air, the pain in my foot overtook me, and I had to stop moving. On the big screen in my sports medicine doctor's office, the imaging looked accusatory. The cup of my heel bone, the calcaneus, was split nearly in half. It had been broken for a while, he explained to me, tapping on the screen with the butt end of his pen to indicate the broadening crack between two pieces of my bone. I had run more than 100 miles on a broken heel. There were good reasons for all this running. Some were athletic. At 5 years into my obsessive relationship with long-distance running, I had found an intensity in my training that had previously eluded me. Others were questions of identity that were soothed by hours of fast-pounding pavement in 85% humidity. I was getting really into my 30s, and it was starting to show in the slope of my ass and the cracks next to my eyes. I had tabled my ego-inflating career and the bags of money that came with it for a dubiously charted stab at a creative life. Everything was uncertain, except the mile. In the mile, I could pour myself into pain and exhaustion and let go of all the big questions for a relentless series of the same small question: quit or keep going? And so I kept going, 20 miles a week, then 30, 40, through a pain that perhaps I had known wasn't normal. It doesn't matter whether I knew or not, because after 2 months of hot twinge in my right foot, that day finally came when I lacked the capacity to ignore it for one more second. You gotta take a rest, my young, sexy surfer doctor told me, looking me hard in the eye. No marathon this year. And there wasn't. Some facts. When I was young, the only important thing was to be thin. Skinny, skinny, skinny. That's what made you beautiful in the 90s. Thin everything. Eyebrows like barely traced pencil lines, thighs like long stretched out pieces of boneless chicken, arms like little bundles of clothesline, tiny asses disappearing under our tiny skirts, our ribs loud, proud stripes under our gauzy going out tops. None of these traits was natural to my physique, so I starved myself into many hospitals, into feeding tubes and cans of Ensure, into a 15 years collection of eating disorders that finally abated in my late 20s. I have been mostly well on that front since then. Even as my relationship with exercise twisted into something I was no longer at the helm of, I had been eating good food with great pleasure without considering vomiting it up for many years. I mostly liked how my body looked, and I felt fully comfortable without clothes on, though I always wished for a more feminine shape to offset my athletic solidity. I considered myself to be in long-term recovery from my eating disorders, as close to normal as someone who had been as sick as I was can get. It had looked for a long time like I was going to be a lifer, of which there are so many, sad 40-somethings carefully counting out pieces of celery. It sucks and it's real, and I remain unspeakably grateful to have been spared that long drawn-out spiral of suffering. But wait, my body said. My mind had caught up to a new reality, one in which I was healthy, an athlete, an eater of protein and sweet potatoes, a drinker of water. But inside me there was damage, and not just the stuff I could see or feel. There were things amiss, hormone things, adrenal things, fertility things. Even though I no longer wished to be skinny, I was no less obsessed with my body than I had been a decade earlier. It had just shifted to function over form. I first learned about physicality and endurance from my father. After the first time I was institutionalized as a teenager, he began running marathons. I hadn't yet run a mile in my life, so I didn't understand the significance of his daily departures in moisture-wicking fabrics and his returns smelling of salt and radiating either deep self-satisfaction or bitter disappointment. I didn't yet understand that how fast you can travel over 10 miles of this earth can determine whether you believe in yourself that day or not. I didn't yet understand that fear and pain and uncertainty can be compressed and moved aside by the cumulative brutality of endurance sport. A year after my heel fractured, I visited a fertility clinic. I had resumed running with the frantic pent-up energy of a mouse sprung from a trap, and my body felt like a hot engine running without oil. After mentioning that he had taught at Harvard, the doctor looked at my medical history, drew me 2 graphs and several diagrams, and showed me a PowerPoint presentation on his early model desktop computer. When you were in puberty, he told me, pointing at something on the computer that I didn't understand, a gland maybe? Your body was starving, and so it didn't. There's a long blank space there where I can remember his mouth moving, and I can remember a dull crumpling feeling behind my sternum, but I cannot remember what he said. And that's why you haven't gotten pregnant. You aren't likely to be able to get pregnant without intervention, and definitely not at your current activity levels. I felt as though I should cry, but I also felt so separated from my body that it would have taken effort to climb back in it and eke tears out. So I didn't cry, and I didn't take notes either, which is why I can't recall the information. I just sat there, mute, as he clicked through the rest of the PowerPoint, and then I traipsed behind him to the exam room, where he smeared cold, sticky lubricant on an ultrasound probe and jabbed it inside me, my compliant legs flopping open when he said so, closing back up when he pulled the device out of me. I paid my bill, and I walked around the parking structure for a long time, not really looking for my truck, just walking, wanting to remain in the interstice of what I knew then and what I hadn't known before. The next thing I remember is lacing my shoes up to go for a run. The honeymoon phase of any addictive behavior is such a swirl of pleasurable brain chemicals and renewed vigor for life that it is for me often impossible to turn away from. I've had it with so many things that I know it by heart, that new relationship energy of a fresh compulsion. Bourbon, heroin, razor blades, credit cards, dangerous sex, face punching, cash, whiskey, bondage, check fraud, vodka, shoplifting, ketamine, methadone, red wine, cigarettes, work, nicotine gum, croissants, wintergreen Skol. There are so many things that have, for a short while, salved my discomforts and offered me peace and pleasure. I loved those things once, each and all of them, until they turned on me, like they all did, like they all do. This, of course, is the nature of compulsion. The substance of the habit becomes almost immaterial after so many years of trying to stuff things into the gaping void of spiritual discomfort. But can a spiritual hole be filled with physical acts? And can a body be reasonably expected to endure the battering it might take to reach serenity? The muddled hope that the pains of the body will beget the solace of the mind has been around for as long as people have been keeping track of such things. Yoga, arguably the first recorded form of physical exercise, was developed as a practice to gird body and mind for extended periods of meditation. These movements will bring you closer to enlightenment. Victorians used early treadmills as curatives for the wicked instincts of prisoners. These movements will bring you farther away from the devil. There is nothing modern except the details of how I have worn down, burned through, and used up my body. At the end of my CrossFit classes, we all collapse on the ground, heaving, flat on our backs or in the fetal position, leaving behind sweat angels in the shape of our splayed out bodies when we finally get up. That's all for now.
I want to say thank you to all 4 of our readers tonight. That was absolutely wonderful. And you should go buy their books and have them sign the books for you. If you want to buy Gabriel Palacios' book, they're over here, and you have to Venmo Tyler, as I understand it. Tyler, do you want me to wrap up with anything else here? Are we good? All right, thank you so much. Have a fantastic night.